Well, hello, welcome back. Here we are on Thursday, and we are reading together today Lamentations chapter 4. Now, yesterday we spent a bit of time reflecting on Lamentations chapter 3 and that little pocket of hope in this book. This book, which is by and large bleak and depressing. In chapter 3, there is that little pocket of hope. And we might have hoped that the trajectory of this book from chapter 3 onwards would continue on that sort of upward curve towards hope and joy and gladness. But sadly, it doesn't. We get into chapter 4 and it reverts back to the anguish, to the pain, to the lament that this book really is all about. Now, chapter 4 has within it what can only be described as some truly stomach-churning images of what was taking place in Jerusalem at the time. We read about some of the suffering that was endured by children, by mothers of children, by rich people, leaders, poor people, and some of the descriptions, I'm sure you will agree if you've read through chapter 4, are truly horrifying, right? We read chapter 4 and we get the impression that there is nobody in Jerusalem who escaped this deep, horrific suffering. And, the poet, as he has done several times already in this book, makes no apologies for alerting us to the fact that all of this has happened because of God. This is what God has done. In verse 11 of chapter 4, it says this. It says, "The Lord gave full vent to his wrath. He poured out his hot anger, and he kindled a fire in Zion that consumed its foundations." Here again, the poet is looking at this scene of devastation and saying this is the result of God pouring out his anger upon us. And what's really interesting is that he says the Lord has given, well, in my translation here, it says the Lord has given full vent to his wrath. Full vent. The Hebrew word underneath that is the word kala, and it means complete or total. And so when the poet says the Lord has given full vent to his wrath, what he means is that every ounce of anger that God has within him has been poured out upon Jerusalem at this time. In other words, there is no anger left within God because he has poured it out fully and totally. He has fully expended his wrath on Jerusalem at this time. That's really interesting because we thought yesterday together about those beautiful verses where it talks about the Lord's compassion. And what's really powerful about that is the same word, kala, is used in those verses too. So here in verse 11 of chapter 4, it says, the Lord has given kala to his wrath. Completely poured out his wrath. There is no more wrath to be poured out. But in Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22, it says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end, to a kala. His mercies never come to an end. And I think that's really powerful because if you pull these two verses together, what we discover is that yes, God is a God of anger and he will come in judgment, but the poet says there is an end, there is a finish, There is a completeness to his anger. It has been completely expended. But in chapter 3, he says when it comes to God's mercies, there is no end. It's not possible for God to pour out his mercy in such a way that there is no more mercy left. I find this so beautiful to reflect on, because what we discover when we draw these two verses together is that yes, God is a God of justice, and yes, God will visit his people in wrath and judgment, but there is a limit. There is a limit to God's anger. But when it comes to God's mercies, there is no limit. There is no end. There is no finish line. His mercies never come to an end. Kala. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful to reflect on? It says in Micah chapter 7, it says, God does not retain his anger forever because he delights in steadfast love. I don't really know how to land this little reflection today, but all I know is that my heart was warmed as I considered these things about the character of God. And I hope today that maybe your heart has been warmed too. Bless you. I'm going to see you tomorrow for our final reading in Lamentations. Take care.